I wanted to introduce myself as Victor Hugo. I'm a French poet, novelist, and a dramaticist. I was born in 1802 in Bissacon, France. My mother was Sophie Tribut. This is a picture of her. And my father was Joseph Leopold Hugo. This is a picture of him. My father was one of my biggest role models growing up. He was a free-thinking Republican and considered Napoleon a hero. It was really funny how my parents fell in love because they couldn't be more different. My mom was a Catholic royalist. My childhood was somewhat tumultuous. I was born in a period of national political turmoil. Napoleon III was proclaimed Emperor of the French just as I was 2 years old, but the Bourbon monarchy had been restored right before I had turned 13. As a child, I moved around a lot because my father was a high-ranking officer in Napoleon's army. But every place we had lived, I had learned something there. My parents separated in 1802, and I moved to Paris with my 2 brothers and my mother. This is when I would say my mom had become my #1 role model. She taught me how important it was to have a Catholic royalist education and that knowledge was power. My early work in poetry reflected devotion to the king and my faith. However, I wound up rebelling against my royalist education and became a Republican and a champion in free thought. In 1822, I married my wife, Adele Foucher. This is a picture of her. We had 5 children. My heart still breaks that my first child, Leopold, had died in his infancy. After losing my son, Leopold, losing my daughter, Leopoldine, in 1843 broke me. This is when I wrote my poem, A Villequier. Poetry had become an outlet for me, and during this time period, I wrote my most famous poem, Demain des L'aube, which means tomorrow at dawn. I lived in exile in 1851 and moved around a lot, but once Napoleon was forced from power as a result of the French defeat in the Franco-Prussian War, I moved back to France for the remainder of my life. In 1841, I was elected to the Académie Française, which solidified my position in the world of French arts and letters. Right after this time is when I became more involved in French politics. In 1845, I was elected to the peerage by King Louis Philippe and entered the High Chamber as a Pair de France. Some of my biggest concerns at this time were abolishing the death penalty, social injustices, freedom of press, and self-government for Poland. In 1848, I was elected to the National Assembly of the Second Republic as a conservative. However, just a year later, I broke with the conservative because I believed in universal suffrage, free education for children, and my advocacy to abolish slavery had finally been renowned internationally. Again, I lived in exile from 1855 to 1870 because Napoleon had seized complete power in 1851, which established an anti-parliamentary constitution, and I had openly declared him a traitor. But while I was in exile, I wrote my best political pamphlets against Napoleon and my most famous work, Les Miserables. This is a copy of one of the first of Les Miserables. Les Miserables was published in 1862. The novel follows the lives of several characters, particularly the struggles of ex-convict Jean Valjean and his experience of redemption. This novel was so important to me that I made sure to examine the nature of law and grace, the history of France, architecture and urban design of Paris, politics, moral philosophy, anti-monarchism, which was the most important, justice, religion, and love. My work, Les Miserables, has been popularized through all of film, television, and stage. Some other books that I had written are The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which was in 1831, The Man Who Laughs in 1869, and The Last Day of a Condemned Man in 1829. Getting back to Napoleon, when Napoleon had fell from power and the Third Republic, I was able to help in the removal of the death penalty in Geneva, Portugal, and Colombia, and had been elected to the National Assembly and the Senate. If you've ever heard of the United States of Europe, this is what sparked my international fame and really established me as a speaker. I had given my advocating views in a speech during the International Peace Congress. Lastly, I wanted to make sure all artists and authors like me would be able to attain a copyright. This is what led to the Berne Convention for the Protection of Literacy and Artistic Works. I believe I've summed up everything in my political and my artistic contributions to the world. Thank you.